So in this video, I'm going to be looking at some clips that an archer sent in and asked for some feedback on. So I'm going to go over these, show you what I'm looking for, how I analyze an archer's technique and some key things that I'm looking at, and then also how this archer would improve. So this actually is Deer Nick. You might remember Deer Nick from about a year ago. I did a video on his technique back then, and now he kind of sent another video and said, you know, is there any other things that I can work on, that sort of thing. So I want to give some feedback here, and it would be really nice to be able to compare that to the previous video. So if you haven't watched that already, I'll put the link and it will kind of pop up on the screen. I'll put the link there so that you can go back and watch that if you want to. So let's get into the video now. So first of all, I just want to go through, and what I want to do is kind of show you what I'm looking for when I review a video, and that way it can kind of help develop your technique eye as well. So when we play through, the first thing I'm always looking at is posture. So it is a little bit hard as the camera's moving here, but I'm always looking at the posture of the body, whether there's a straight T line here, upwards, and then the arms out to the side. So I'm always looking for that. The kind of first immediate thing that jumps out at me is there is a slight forward lean. You might be able to see that there, just kind of a slight pushing forward to the target. But that's just kind of something that always jumps out at me because I'm always looking at posture. That's the bedrock of everything, really. Another thing I'm always looking for is any movement. So archery is all about having the central part of your body stable and not moving ideally, and then obviously the arms are moving around that, and then on release, that's when your arms are moving the biggest amount. But even on the release, everything ideally stable. So if we watch through, you'll see that the release is very, very good. And this is one of the areas in the previous video I did with Deer Nick. It was working on the release and how he would improve that, and also the tension on the draw side at that point. But that's much better. There is a little bit of movement on the release there though. So let's just play through again, and I want to give you the opportunity to watch through, and I won't say anything here. We can just watch through the video and see if you pick up on any other points as well. There we go. So a couple of things there. Obviously there's a lot going on. I just noticed some kind of extra movement of the body and the head coming up, almost leaning into the shot, into the target side a little bit too much, and maybe moving the head. And then when the drawing is happening, there's a little bit of movement around there. If I go back, you'll be able to see that. So if you watch the head against the background here, I always look for some sort of background against the nose or the chin to see if the head is moving. So again, it's a little bit hard because the camera's moving, but you can clearly see here, the head is aligned with some of the lines on the roof here, and then the head moves back there. So there's kind of a big movement of the head, and that's because of the starting position is just a tiny bit too hunched over. So it is better than last year, definitely, and better than the last time, but it's just a little bit hunched still, and just improving that, just making sure to feel. A good reference you can have is feeling like there's a string just pulling the crown of the head up slightly. So instead of being down like this, if I just switch that round, instead of being down like this, you can just feel like the string is just slightly pulling the head, and you're upright. You're by no means doing this and kind of overarching the body or puffing the chest out, not doing that, but just making sure that the head is upright and there's a nice straight line through the spine. Another thing that you can kind of imagine this with, a lot of people like this, is imagining there's a rod going through the head, so maybe like a wooden beam going through the head all the way through the spine and then rooted into the floor. That's kind of another visual metaphor you can do for that. So now, let me switch that back. Now let's go through the other angles. So this one, we've gone through the other shot, sorry. So there's just a little bit of movement there. Yeah, so there we go. So I was hoping at the end of the video here there might be some other angles, but it looks like the only angles here from Deer Nick are from the front, but no worries. This is a good concept to look at as well. So one thing that's really important to develop is your ability, when you're looking at videos of yourself, your ability to almost imagine what the technique would look like from the other side, even though you're only seeing a 2D image. So say for example, in this place, we're only seeing the image obviously from this angle, this dimension, so it's a 2D thing. But from here, you can start to imagine what the rest of the shot would look like as you move around. So for example, at this point, when the bow is on the foot, at this point here, if I was to view from this way, I would imagine when I'm viewing from that way that I would see the shoulders slightly hunched over. So that's an example. So you can start to build up a picture of what it would look like from other angles. Another example might be, imagine what it would look like from overhead. This is a really useful, I'll put that back, a really useful way to think about this is what it would look like from overhead when the archer's shooting. So particularly during the draw and coming to setup, how would this look from overhead? In this example, I would say that the draw hand in this place might be just a little bit too close to the bow arm here. So it might just be a little bit too close. Being a tiny bit further away could help keep this line straight. So again, although we can't see from this angle, we can't see that there might be a little kink in the wrist and arm here. It actually looks like if you were to view from overhead, you would be able to see a slight bend that way. So it's very, very good, to be honest, this arm. It's not, it's not a big amount at all, but it might benefit from just working a little bit on straightening that out. Yeah, so one thing, when we go through here, watch, this is the particular bit that I saw earlier when Dianik is coming up and coming into anchor here. There's definite lean to the target, as I mentioned about the posture. So there's a definite lean there. But then crucially, when the draw is happening, that's when there's this extra bit of lean. So it's almost like the draw is happening here. And then as Dianik is coming under here and then coming into anchor, there's a bit of that. And you'll see this on the video. There. There. So you can see how as Dianik is coming under, there's a bit of extra lean and just losing the core. So the reason this is important, and I always say about the core and the posture, that kind of stuff, the reason this is important is if you lose the core and the engagement there, and you lose where your body is, i.e. in this example, pushing a bit too much to the target with the upper body, if you lose that, then you lose some feeling in your shoulders. So it's hard for you to feel where your shoulders are, and then it's hard for you to get feedback from those. The reason this is important is this brings us on to the next point. This is the finer part of the shot that you might not have noticed, but you'll see it now quite clearly. So what I want to show you is the release. On first kind of look, the release looks really good. So there's obviously a nice kind of balance between the two sides. It's controlled, release fingers are good, but what we do want to look at is, if you look at the front arm here, so you look at the front arm and then the elbow joint here as well. I'm going to play through, I'm going to kind of press the arrow key and play through frame by frame, and you'll see a bit of movement. So watching here and here. So you can see on release, if I just go frame by frame like this, I go back and forth, you can see this is obviously the arrow is still in the bow at this point, it's at full draw. And then at this point, this is part way through the release. You can see the arrow is halfway, it's still in the bow. This is the moment the arrow is leaving, but there's been a bit of movement, and you can see if I toggle back and forth, you can see that. So what that means is at the very moment that the arrow is leaving the bow, there's a little bit of movement on the elbow and the shoulder, and you can also see a little bit on the bow as well. You can see the bow almost moving against the background. So what that means is effectively, just at the moment of release, there's a little bit of a collapse on the front shoulder. It's a little bit too weak and it's not maintained enough. So you'll see it's a little bit more apparent in the first shot, I think, in this video. There. So you can see as well in this one, in particular, even after the arrow's gone, the arm is kind of straightening a bit like that, and it's going from here to like that. Not always a bad thing, depending on how consistently you can do it. You do want to maintain the arm, but it would be better if we could just maintain it all the way through without having this kind of slight push and the kind of extension on release too much. Now, you'll also see on release, there's this, you can see the release happens and then afterwards, so the release happens here, and then afterwards, this movement here, if you watch the body, you'll see that the release happens and then like that, the body rotates around. there. So there's just a little bit of extra twisting and a couple of things going on here. So those are an overview of some of the key things that I can see from this that I would then work on. So what I want to do now is basically say what the order would be, what, you know, if I was this archer, what I would work on first and how I would work on that. So the first thing, as you've probably guessed, is always going to be posture. It's always going to be working on that T shape. So what I would do in this case is work with some drills and make sure that the posture is being maintained. So I definitely use a delay camera from this angle that Dianik sent. So from this angle, putting a delay camera, working on the posture and making sure to keep it. Now, the way I would do that is I would shoot normally, that's fine as well. But I'd also do some shooting with my feet. So I shoot with a square stance, so normally my feet might be something like this. But instead, I would then just move the feet touching. So they're really, you know, they're literally touching together. And then I would do some shooting with this. And what that does is it narrows your stance, makes it very unstable. And any movement this way or this way when you lose the posture makes it very, very hard to shoot because you're basically losing your balance and you'll really feel it very, very quickly. So this is a great drill to do for that and is a great example. What I'd also do to work on the posture is work on the head movement. So obviously if your head is kind of your reference point because that's where you feel, you know, you feel a lot of your body movement from there. If your head is moving, it's harder to feel what's happening with your body. So I'd work on particularly this point where Dianik is going from here to here. This head movement, I'd work on eliminating that first. And then from there, I'd work on eliminating the next bit of head movement, which is from the draw into anchor. So I definitely work on eliminating head movement. So there you've got two kind of essential things. You've got the posture and the head movement, and I definitely work on eliminating those two. Now the third thing I'd work on, I just want to give three things here to kind of focus it down a bit. The third thing I'd work on is the way that Dianik is thinking about the bow shoulder and the bow arm and the way that this is kind of being kept through the shot. So quite a common issue is if it feels like the bow shoulder is a bit weak, it's tempting to try and push the bow shoulder out more because it feels like it's being collapsed inwards, it's being pushed inwards. It's tempting to then try and push it outwards more. And often what that can cause, which is exactly what we see here, is the kind of losing of the upper body, stretching a bit too far to the target. So that's exactly what we see here. And what this means is basically that the way I think Dianik is thinking about this is, you know, the bow shoulder has to be almost pushed straight to the target to get your alignment. And this is the kind of key difference here. But what we actually want, if I put it to kind of a bigger screen there, what we actually want, we want less of, if we say this is where we are with the posture, this is a straight posture here, we want less of this to try and get the bow shoulder alignment, less pushing and feeling like you're stretching the shoulder out. We want less of that and more of that. So it's almost less pushing and more rotating. And crucially, it feels like you almost have a hinge at this point in the shoulder and you're rotating and you're basically, this hinge is at the moment is open and you're just opening that hinge more. And the way you're doing that is you're actually bringing your body around. And as you bring your body around, you're bringing this joint relative to this one inwards. So it's like you're hinging round and you're basically opening up the front shoulder and this brings it into better line. So it's more of a twisting and rotating to get that line on the front shoulder instead of trying to just push it out. Because, you know, if I take that to an extreme example, if I open my stance here, like this, I can try and push as much as I want here and the bow will feel like the bow shoulder will feel like it's being pushed in and the bow weight is pushing in like that. It will feel like that, but I can try and push it out to resist it, but the alignment is still the same. And what that's going to do is if I try and push too much, I'll just lose the posture, and then I lose the balance and the kind of fine motor control as well. So what you need to do instead is feel like you're twisting, you're rotating and getting into better line to get that. And what that will do as well is it will make the alignment of the bow shoulder better, but it will also make the distance between the string and the arm closer. So this is where you need to be really mindful of making sure, in this example, Dianik has great elbow rotation, which is really, really good. But if you're doing this and your elbow rotation isn't good, the string is going to be closer to your arm. so it's going to have more chance that it's going to hit your arm here. So you need to be really mindful of that and make sure that, you know, you basically have this elbow rotation, you have the shoulder position, and then you've got enough clearance, because by getting more alignment, you're going to have the string closer to your arm. So I just wanted to kind of go through some points there. I just wanted to keep it to 3 main points for Dearnick. Yeah, so thank you a lot, Dearnick, as well, for sending the video in. I really appreciate that. I'm really happy with the progress you've made for sure. I definitely recommend just kind of working, kind of finessing a few of those areas, particularly with the posture, the head position, and then that alignment. I definitely recommend that. It's actually a really good setup you've got here with in the video you can see all the beams. I definitely recommend, if there's one of those high beams, so maybe this one, if there's this high beam here, I definitely recommend maybe putting a camera on that, or maybe balancing your phone, that kind of thing, taking some videos from overhead and seeing what your shooting looks like from overhead as well, in terms of the shoulder alignment, that kind of thing. I think that would be great for you to do, see how that alignment looks, and you can learn a lot from getting feedback from that overhead view and working on that as well in your shooting. So I hope that's been useful. If you've enjoyed watching the video, be sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.